Welcome to Motherhood. I'm Dr. Christina Hibbert, and I'm here to help you overcome, to become, and to flourish in this hopefully consciousness-raising experience we call motherhood. And today that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the conscious way to parent and to be a mother with our incredible guest, New York Times bestselling author, Dr. Shefali Tsabary. And we're going to be introducing her in just a moment. But first, I want to thank you for joining us here each week on Motherhood. As you know, this is the place where we come to not just go through motherhood, but to choose to grow through motherhood. As I like to say, it's a lot better to grow through it and to do it together here each week on Motherhood. If you haven't already, I hope you'll join us on Facebook, on our Facebook group called Growing Through Motherhood. So if you just go to Facebook and type in Growing Through Motherhood, you'll be able to see us there, ask to join, and you can be part of our little community that we're starting here, where we just can get together, share our experiences as moms, support one another, and learn and grow together. Also, I hope you'll visit me on my website at drchristinahibbert.com for all kinds of resources on all the things we talk about here on Motherhood, as well as free gifts and links to my books, Who Am I Without You?, my award-winning memoir, This Is How We Grow, and my brand new book, 8 Keys to Mental Health Through Exercise. You can also find links to the videos that we do for this show. Some of you don't know that we often record the videos, and we'll be doing that for today's episode. You can find those on YouTube. And also connect with us on social media. We're all over the place on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, wherever you are, we are. And we love to connect with you. And I especially love to hear what you want to know about here on Motherhood. Now, without further ado, let's start to talk a little bit about our topic for today. I remember when I very first heard Dr. Shefali speak on Oprah, nonetheless. That's where I saw her the first time. And her message really resonated with me because as a mother of 6 and as a parenting quote unquote expert for all these years, I've kind of taken a similar approach to what she teaches about, although as you'll see today, she has so much wisdom to share, so much we can learn from, and I've really enjoyed learning from her through her books. But for me, I really agree that parenting really is about the parent and not about the child. And I say that all the time. I say parenting is about the parent and not the child. Otherwise, it would be called childing and not parenting, right? So it's about growing us as parents versus us forming our children into something. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to be conscious as a parent and how to help our children become the best they can be, but also to grow ourselves along the way, because that's really what we're here for. And I really love the idea that we can become more conscious as parents. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh no, this is making me feel like I'm a bad parent today or something like that. You know, we all feel that way. And I admit, when I first heard Dr. Shefali's message, I kind of felt like, oh man, I have a long way to go. But you know, you'll see as you speak with her today, she is just the warmest, most loving person, and she will help us all become more conscious as parents. And that's really what we're here for. And one thing that I remember too that I wanted to share is I remember being at a conference a few years back, and the speaker was talking about motherhood. And she was talking to all of us out there who had children who were not quote unquote, turning out the way we'd hoped, right? The children who were misbehaving or who had gotten into serious trouble or had gone off on a wayward path, something that we didn't want for them. And she was talking about how we so often blame ourselves for these things, and we take it to mean that we're not a good parent because this is how they turned out. And I had been dealing with that a lot in a group that I'd been doing with women, where I'd had a lot of women who had children who had kind of gone off on a different path, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And they really took it to mean that they weren't good enough. And the one message that I took away from there that I want to just kind of share with all of you to get us started is she said something like, the fruit of motherhood isn't how our children turn out. The fruit of motherhood is how we turn out. And that's what this show's all about. And that's what today's episode is all about. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome in Dr. Shefali to our show today. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited. That was a wonderful introduction to what we all go through. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I couldn't be happier. I have to tell you, when I first started doing this show just a few months ago, about 6 months ago, I made a wish list of guests my dream guests, and you were my first on my list. So
That's amazing. Well, you manifested it, that's for sure.
I believe so. I believe so. So, let me first introduce you, Dr. Shefali, and then we will just jump right in. And also, I want to share with all of you listeners, I hope you'll stick around. I mean, first of all, stick around because this is going to be an incredible show. If you haven't read any of Dr. Shefali's books yet, or seen her on Oprah or anywhere else, wherever she's been speaking, there's so much to learn here. So I really hope you'll get a pen and pencil or pen and paper and start writing down some notes and keep track of the things that you're learning as we go. But also at the end of the show, we're going to be doing my Dr. Christie's Simple Solutions segment with Dr. Shefali, and she's got some incredible resources to share. And specifically, we're going to be talking about her workshop, Deconstructing Parenthood, the Conscious Way with Dr. Shefali. So I hope you'll stick around to hear more about that at the end of the show as well. All right, so Dr. Shefali is a New York Times bestselling author of The Conscious Parent, Transforming Ourselves, Empowering Our Children. And let me tell you, I've had this book by my nightstand I actually had it there months before I even met Dr. Shefali, but I've really been reading it lately and studying it, and it is a fabulous book I recommend for all of you to go pick up. She's also the author of Out of Control, Why Disciplining Your Child Doesn't Work and What Will. Also a great book. I have that one as well. I've just started reading that one as well. We all could use help when it comes to quote unquote discipline. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the show today. And then she's also a clinical psychologist. She does see clients, and she does do some consultations through Skype as well. And she is an international speaker in high demand around the world, and a guest of both Oprah's Soul series and Oprah's Lifeclass. So if you haven't seen those, go check those out. She is amazing on those shows and just has so much to offer and to share with us, which we're going to get to hear today. So again, thanks for being here, Dr. Shefali, and go ahead and jump in. You ready?
Yes, absolutely.
I think you were born ready. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about this idea of conscious parenting. And I thought maybe we could start by having you just sort of give an idea to our listeners what you mean or describe for us what you mean by conscious parenting.
I'll even go broader than that.
Please.
And, talk about what I mean by consciousness in living.
Great.
And then how parenting just exemplifies the consciousness aspect that really should be integral to every moment of our lives, with or without children.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by consciousness is having the awareness, the present moment awareness, that we are constantly bringing within every dynamic, within every experience of our lives, our own bias, our own belief systems, and our own conditioning from childhood. So there is no moment that is separate from our past. And our past is constantly influencing our present. Now, all of us know this on an intellectual level, but we kind of don't want to believe it. We want a free ride, because that would mean we would have to examine every moment and look at it through the lens of, what am I bringing to this moment? How am I influencing this? How is my rigidity or my narrow view of looking at the world impacting my relationships and my way of enjoying life right now? How is it getting in my way of fulfillment? That takes a lot of personal responsibility. And then life just becomes so heavy and kind of a drag, right? Who wants to have so much personal responsibility? The joy of life almost is to blame others, to pretend like we're victims, to not fully own it, to pretend like we didn't know. All those childish and immature ways of living have become a cop-out, but in a way they've become addictive because they are easier to live by. It is much easier to have a whole story about how our mothers messed up and how that's why we are so angry or unhappy with our lives, or how our spouses are messing up, or if only our spouse was better. And then now we have children, and children are in a way kind of helpless because they are younger and less powerful in might or in strength. So for once we can overpower someone else, So with our children now, we have a free ride to blame and project, and we're going to go all over town with it. We're just going to go completely crazy because there's no one there to tell us that we're wrong, right? I mean, within the parent-child dynamic, the way it's set up is that the parent has full hierarchy, right? Full control. So with our children, we are just going to do things that we would never do with a friend or never do with a spouse. So consciousness flies out the window when it comes to parenting even more. So
Yes.
my work and your work is all about encouraging parents to take responsibility, personal responsibility for every moment of their relationship with their children, and understand that their children are not theirs to own, to puppeteer, to produce, to create, to screenwrite, to direct, and really take ownership of themselves and not project all that stuff onto their children.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love how you broadened it for us first, because you're right. A lot of our listeners might not be completely aware of what consciousness in general looks like. And you're right. It's very easy in today's world to tune out. We are too busy. We are online all the time or on devices, and we aren't present with what's happening in our life. But, your point being that we need to be willing to do that in general. And then as parents, even more so, because that role of parent kind of does make us, we do kind of treat our children in a different way. You're right, because we're not seeing them as another human being like we would our neighbor or our friend, right? That's what you're trying to say.
Right. That natural distance that gets created when you say, oh, that person is a neighbor, or that person is my partner, goes away. That distance goes away when it's your child. It's my child. And then the child comes from your biology. And then your child has your name. Or even if your child doesn't have your biology, you've been with that child for years and you're in charge of that child. So when you feel like you're in charge of someone, we equate being in charge with being in control. So our personal investment in this person is so high that dare they do anything wrong, right? Or dare they smear our sense of rightness or reputation or sense of well-being, we're going to go really crazy when somebody violates that. So this sense of ownership over our children is dangerous because it is an illusion. We don't own our children. We don't own anyone. We only own our own energy and our own selves. But with our children, and the way it's set up in parenting, all the parenting books out there encourage this sort of illusion that you own your children. Books say, or experts will ask, well, what are you doing about that? How are you controlling that situation, or how are you disciplining your child? And in that very unconscious way, we foster this delusion that parents have today that we do own our children. We can mass produce children. We can create the perfect child, and no one gets to stop us. Yes. So this is a dangerous delusion that we're living under.
I couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate your point of view. And I think it's more than a point of view. I think it's the truth, honestly, with a capital T here. I'm thinking of the poet Khalil Gibran and how he relates children to the arrows, and we parents are the bows that stretch to hopefully aim and shoot the arrows off, but the arrows fly and they're separate from us, right? I love that kind of imagery, that we are not our children and they are not, they of course aren't us either. But don't you think one part of this, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, yeah, but so many parents, we do feel like they are sort of us in a sense. And so you say, first of all, there's a sense of control over them, that we are supposed to control them or make them do this or that, but also how that reflects on us when they do something, quote unquote, that we deem unworthy or not right, how that reflects poorly on us as parents. And so there's that ego that's involved as well.
Yes, and many parents are not ready to embrace Khalil Gibran's spiritual evolved message. Yeah. What he was trying to say is that, yes, we may be dependent on each other, say for our birth, and we do have a codependent relationship in that small aspect. But after that initial birthing of our children and the biological dependence, it becomes an interdependent relationship. And then soon it just becomes independent. Mm-hmm. But many of us parents are not ready to embrace that we are just the birthers of our children, and after that they are their true spiritual entities, ready to fly and embrace their destiny.
Right.
Many parents are like, no, they are mine, they are mine. So what I encourage parents to do, if they're not ready to embrace that we are truly separate spiritual entities, interdependent in this journey called life, then let's not be in that relationship with heavy control and ego, right? Can we treat our children as ours in the most beautiful, essence-filled, connected way, rather than in this controlling way? You know, there are two ways that we can treat things as ours. We can treat it as ours by having the most beautiful relationship with them and really fostering that deep connectivity and really ushering our children's spirit. Or we can treat things as ours as possessions, as full-on ownership and control. You know, so there's two ways to treat things as ours. So can we at least go, if we're going to treat them as ours, can we go in the deep connection? I'm here to usher your spirit. I will create the conditions for you to rise, but I won't control the way your arrow falls. Right? So let's shift in that energy. But we just inhabit that very controlling, possessive, you know, fear-based energy.
Right. And the way, when you're saying this, I'm imagining you have some kind of worldly possession that is ours, but you care for, like your home. You know, you take care of your home, you beautify it, you nurture it, you know, and instead of seeing children as our possession where we're controlling it and all of these kinds of things, you love your child. So it's a different kind of a take on parenting, I think, for many out there listening right now.
Well, our problem is that we consider our children and our home and our zip code and our cars and our possessions as reflections of ourselves.
Yes.
And when we do that, that's when things go awry.
Yes.
You know, and I always tell women or even men, you know, if you want to beautify yourself and you want to look a certain way, and it's coming out of an insecurity, that's still okay. You're human and you're allowed to do that. But when we project that onto our children, that's when it becomes toxic, because we are now imposing our insecurity on someone else. So when we push our children to say, do great at grades, you know, we're fooling ourselves when we say that we're doing it for them. A lot of it is for ourselves. When we push our children to be great at being good dancers or good swimmers, part of it is for them, but a lot of it is for our sense of worth, our sense of being. We want them to make us feel better. And that's when it becomes toxic.
Yes. Oh, such a beautiful point. And I hope everybody out there is hearing this. And I appreciated what you said as well, that not everybody will be ready to fully comprehend all this or fully take it in. But little by little, that's what the awakening is all about. The consciousness is all about, is little by little becoming more aware of what you're saying, that, you know, that your child is not your possession, for instance, or that, you know, that your child really, you shouldn't feel like what your child does reflects on you, because they're their own person, right? So little by little, we start to take these things in and we start to kind of evolve as parents. And one thing, I want to read a page from your book, The Conscious Parent, that I think kind of speaks to what we're talking about right now. And it was one of my favorite parts. It's on page 11, and it's talking about how our children are our greatest awakeners. And I'm a believer in this too. Like I said, I think, you know, parenting is the best place to be if you want to awaken, to evolve, to grow. So here's what Dr. Shefali writes. She writes, while we believe we hold the power to raise our children, the reality is that our children hold the power to raise us into the parents they need us to become. For this reason, the parenting experience isn't one of parent versus child, but of parent with child. The road to wholeness sits in our children's lap, and all we need to do is take a seat. As our children show us our way back to our own essence, they become our greatest awakeners. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the reason we see our children as possessions and extensions of ourselves, and we need them to be happy and we need them to be successful, is for one reason only, because we don't feel whole and complete within ourselves. We need to feel that we have been good parents, because on our own, without the identity of parent, we don't feel complete. And this is where all the dysfunction or miscommunication and unhappiness starts. is because we on our own haven't fully developed ourselves. We ourselves are sitting on so much unhealed emotional baggage from our own childhood. We perhaps, most of us were raised by unconscious parenting, where our parents did not fully see us for who we were. We were carved and molded into extensions of our parents' idealized image. We were not allowed to speak our truth. I still have parents in their 30s, 50s who tell me even today that they're scared to use their authentic voice because they still are besieged by an inner critic, by that inner parent who told them, who you are authentically or what you felt authentically had no place because it made them uncomfortable or it made them unhappy. And we do this to our children too. We're constantly telling them not to cry, not to feel, not to believe in things that they believe in. We're constantly contouring them to become who we think they should be because it's too scary to be without the identity of a good mother. We don't even know what that is, but we all want to be a good mother or a good father.
Yes.
So it really starts with our own self. Have we finished the work from our childhood? Are we aware that we have our own pain and that when we are upset with our children, it's because we are being triggered, not because our child is necessarily legitimately bad. It's because we have been triggered. And because we don't know this, we are not aware of ourselves. We don't want to take responsibility. So it's so much easier to think that our children are bad, and talk about their behavior. And then we want to fix their behavior. And then all the parenting experts are giving book after book on fixing children's behavior. So you see how we in the parenting industry are also constantly fanning this illusion that children need to be fixed. Children do not need to be fixed. They need to be fixed because we are broken.
Ooh, hear that, people. The children need to be fixed because we are broken. And I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. I've always, ever since I've been a parent, for 19 years, and ever since I've been doing parenting, I have been aware of that myself, that everybody would come in to parenting classes that I was teaching or as a client or whatever they'd be doing, and they'd want to know, how do I discipline my child? How do I fix this specific problem? And when I used to teach parenting, I'd, just like you did in your book, I would put discipline very last because I thought you can't really help your child or teach your child, which really is what discipline's all about in my mind, and I think you would agree with that. You can't do that unless you are sort of in control of yourself. It's not about controlling your child. It's about learning how to change and grow and be able to kind of control yourself and be in control when you're with your child so that you can be present and you're not just overtaken by the past and the emotions that come up. But it's so easy to get caught up in that. Like you said, I mean, it's everybody has experienced this, right?
Exactly. And it takes so much work, right?
Yes.
It takes being so present. So even something simple, like I'll give you an example. The other day I had a client who kept complaining that their son, it was a couple that came to me, and they were complaining that their son refused to go for a shower. So the fights used to be about daily battles around hygiene. So for example, they would, yell out to, say his name is Tom. I'll give him a name, Tom. Tom, go for your shower. And then I asked the parents, then what do you guys do? So they're like, mom says, I go and start cooking. And dad says, well, I'm busy and I'm in the garage or I'm fixing things. And then 15 minutes later, they see Tom just being on his gadget or hanging around. And then they're like, Tom, why didn't you go for a shower? Go for a shower right now. So then they give back the order or the command, and then they expect it to be followed. But again, Tom doesn't listen because he doesn't think he needs to listen,
Right.
because his parents are not showing any urgency in their behavior that this needs to be followed, because mom goes back to cooking, dad goes back to doing whatever. So the parents' argument is that why should we have to police our children? And my argument is, okay, what happened next? I always ask, what happened next? You're right, you shouldn't have to police your children, but let's see what happened next. And what happened next was that, they didn't police their, quote unquote, police their children, but within 2 seconds, they were yelling at him, grounding him, punishing him, and they were in therapy with me because they didn't know how to handle their emotions. So I said to parents, why are you looking at it in such a black and white way? Either police your kids or do nothing equals yelling at your kids, right? Is there another model to follow? Right? And I said the model to follow really is to be more present, to connect with Tom. So I said to mom and dad, I said, stop what you're doing, because you have a need, a desire that Tom have a shower, which is a good desire to have. It's not entirely ego based. It's really coming from a nice place of wanting your child to be clean. So do something about it. Stop what you're doing, go to Tom, use your presence, connect with him, and make sure that you don't leave the situation till Tom is in the shower. Take that 5 minutes to kind of be present, connect, make it happen, versus keep commanding, keep barking, keep yelling, and then scream at your kid.
Yes.
So the parents' argument is then, why do we need to do this? I go, because children need us to connect to them. Sometimes they are inattentive, they are distracted, they are children after all. So they need us to connect like glue sometimes and just usher them into making it happen. So that's how you create the condition for it to happen. Sometimes I've told parents, yeah, you need to get off your devices. You need to shut the house down if you want your child to understand that now it's bedtime. Mm-hmm. So the parent says, why do I need to shut down? Well, because the child is not picking up on the fact that this is an important transition. You need to help the child to transition. But the parents don't want to do the work, yes. Right? They want to yell, they want to puppeteer, and then when it doesn't get done, because the child should just be a puppet, we get angry with our children. So this is the delusional loop, the default loop that we fall, prey to. Yell at your kid, bark an order, expect it to be done. The child doesn't do it because the child is a child, either playing, goofing off, distracted, or slightly rebellious, and testing you really to see, are you serious about this? Why do you want me to get this done? Mm-hmm. Prove to me that it's important. Teach me that it's important, and embody it yourself, and then maybe I'll listen. So we don't want to, we the parents don't want to do all this work.
Yes.
Right? We just want to have it done. We want to command it, it should be done. Well, life doesn't work like that, and children are not like that. They require that presence from us. But once you give them the presence, it takes literally 3 minutes versus it taking 3 days to get something done.
Absolutely. Oh gosh. I hope everybody's hearing this example. I think it's making me feel, I guess, like I can relate a lot to what you're saying. And what I really love is that you are, I think a lot of people misunderstand this idea of conscious parenting as being sort of sitting around and just full, obviously it is. It's focused on love and compassion and all this, but no discipline, sort of, like they could take it too far to mean, okay, well then we just want to be our child's friend and we want to have this relationship, but we're not going to teach them or lead them. And what you're saying is, no, you need to kind of join with them together and walk them through what they need to learn at that time. And I think, again, this points back to the idea that we as parents, our greatest role is really to be a teacher. And then they learn what they learn. And, the word education means like bringing the message to somebody, but it doesn't necessarily imply that they have taken in the message. It's up to them. And there's even a thought that you can't really teach anybody but yourself. Because you can't go and teach somebody. That doesn't happen. It's not like a transitive verb like that. But you can teach your child and walk with them through that and try to lead and be the example is what I'm hearing as well. And then your child hopefully learns what they need to learn that way versus trying to control them and mold them into something that you want for them instead, and that it maybe isn't what they need or what they really want for themselves.
Right. This is not, a goal to be met. And we treat children as meeting our goals. Go for a shower, go for soccer, come home and do your homework, eat your dinner properly, be polite. We just have one goal after the other, and those are great goals to have. But those goals are never going to be met if we meet them as if they're meant to be met solely. The way to approach parenting is to truly connect with your children, understand the needs beneath the behavior, and understand that the behavior is always masking a need. So most of the parents don't want to do the hard work it takes, right? So we want to believe that it's either all or nothing. That's why they believe conscious parenting. Oh, that must be just letting your children do whatever they want. What they don't understand, like you said, is that conscious parenting takes so much presence. Mm-hmm. It's being with your child moment after moment, seeing their behaviors as masking a need, and not just looking at our children as goal-oriented beings. Go for soccer, eat your food well, talk politely, hug me, say you love me, say thank you. they are not our puppets, and we will not be able to influence them and really inspire them to develop themselves to their highest beings if we keep controlling them as puppets. We need to connect with them, treat them as sovereign beings, and really understand that they are full on human beings just like we are. And they will only motivate themselves when they feel that they are connected to their worth. The greatest gift you can give your child is to allow them to understand that they are worthy, they are fully human and allowed to make mistakes and grow into their fullest potential, their fullest being, their fullest expression. They are allowed to have limitations. When children connect to that, they themselves will want to have their bath. They themselves will want to have shiny, beautiful hair. They themselves will want to treat their bodies like temples. So instead of yelling at them to treat their bodies like a temple, we need to connect them to their worth, and then they will. So something even simple, I'll give you another example. The old paradigm of parenting says, your children should eat whatever you cook, whatever's on the table. While that's true for the mother and the father who absolutely have no choice, have no time, have no patience, have no energy, no creativity, yes. But otherwise, let's look at this very simple adage and understand what message it's giving our children. We're teaching our children that they're not allowed to tune into their bodies. They're not allowed to say, what does my body need right now? Does it need something hot? Does it need something cold? Does it need a protein? Does it need a carbohydrate? And we don't even allow our children to tune in. Not only that, we yell at them and punish them because they're defiant by not respecting us, by eating our food.
Yes.
Do you and I eat what our boss gives us to eat every day, or do we decide to eat what we feel like eating?
Right.
So look how we treat our children, and the books all support it.
Yep.
All the experts will tell you your child is being defiant by not eating and not respecting and not being grateful. Now we've made it a gratitude issue. We've made it about respect. And the poor kid is like, I just don't feel it, Mom. I can't eat fish today.
I know, right.
So we are actually disconnecting our children from their bodies all the time.
Oh, wow. Okay, you've said so much here. I want to break it down a little bit. Going back to this idea of, well, you said something in your book, I think that kind of sums up what you're talking about here. You said you will only accept your child to the degree that you accept yourself, right? And I couldn't agree more with this, because I talk a lot about self-worth and the difference between self-worth and self-esteem. Self-esteem being this idea perpetuated by the world, self-esteem being based on how we feel about ourselves and think about ourselves and what we do and our behavior and all these things that change. And self-worth being that just knowing that we are worthy, right? That conscious awareness of who we really are, right? The bigger me, yes, with a capital M. And so I actually developed a model that I wrote about in my book, Who Am I Without You? And it talks about how the way that I found to help people discover self-worth is all these things that you're talking about. It starts with self-awareness, and then it builds up to self-acceptance, and then it builds to self-love. And that applies to us as much as to our children, because what you're saying, our children are triggered by things. And just like you're saying, our child needs to be able to tune in and say, this is what I need. This is why I'm feeling this way. And I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, of course, there are times when I'm hormonal or something and I just can't deal in the same way, or I don't want to eat the same thing, or I don't. And why should it be any different for my child? And we want to teach them how to tune in and how to take care of their needs. I mean, gosh, especially as mothers and women, that's one thing we're always lacking in, I think, is self-care, appropriate care for ourselves. And I think self-care, a big part of that is this awareness of ourselves and our own emotional needs. So I'm thinking of an example of, one of my teenage sons he's off at college now, but he was giving us some trouble for a couple of years. And he, when he was getting in trouble and doing some things that by any parent standard would not have been okay, and I did feel myself triggered all the time, but I would sort of try to stop and ask myself, what is this bringing out in me? And I could tell it wasn't that I was even disappointed in him or anything. It was that I was afraid. This was one of our children that we adopted 8 years ago, who was my nephew before. And then my sister and brother-in-law died, and suddenly he was my son. And all along, I think I had this fear that this adopted child was going to rebel and leave and not accept the love that we were trying to offer, or not accept our family, or, and he was about to turn 18. And I'd always feared that if he turned 18, he could just say, well, forget you guys, I'm out of here. And it really had nothing to do with him. It was all about me and my fear and my doubts of my own worth as a mother. And so again, though, it's that, like you said, we don't want to do that work as parents. It's hard, it's painful, and yet it's that doorway that opens to greater self-awareness, to greater self-acceptance, to greater self-love, that when I could then go work on those things for myself, then I can approach him from a place of love versus approaching him from a place of fear. And, the Bible talks about that love is the opposite of fear, kind of, it's, so it really is that opportunity for all of you listeners, what Dr. Shefali's talking about. It's not easy to do our own work that we need to do. And I always say that's my first rule of parenting is do your own work first. You really can't be the most present, loving parent until you have handled whatever you're going through. And parenting will bring it all out of you. It definitely will. But, do your own work first. And it's that perfect opportunity to do so by just being present to what's happening, and then going internal is what I'm hearing as well, going into yourself and saying, what is this triggering in me? And then respecting our children enough to want to know from them, what is this triggering in them? And that's one other point that I took from your book, is being able to really go there with them and really want to listen why. I loved how you said, first say to them, I know you have some feelings about this. I'd like you to share your feelings, and then I will share mine. Instead of us putting our feelings onto them and not listening to them. We say we're listening, but we're really not.
Yes. So to open up that awareness within the dynamic of parent and child, that we are really co-creators, we are partners. I, as the parent, am deeply flawed, I'm deeply limited. I want to develop connection with you, but I'm going to mess up. I want to be the best example, but I'm not always perfect. You are, in fact, already more perfect than I can ever be. And giving that power to our children, that's very scary for parents. Parents feel that, we should always appear imposing, put together, and in control. Right. And parents don't realize that that is the worst message to give your children, because you just create this abyss between the two of you, this great chasm between the two of you, because your child feels you're unapproachable. Just yesterday, I had a child tell the mother, the reason I don't tell you anything is because every time I open my mouth, you judge me all the time, or you judge my friends all the time. So the mother had no awareness, right? And she said, I do. She had complete unawareness of her energy and how judgmental she was. And her son, like all our children, so deeply intuitive, so clever, picked up right away, oh, I can't talk to mom about this, can't talk to mom about that. And without our realizing our own judgments, coming out of deep fear and longing for our children to be the best they can be, we are messing it all up. We're actually creating disconnection. So how do we stay open with our children, becoming fully present to our judgments, to our opinions, to how we want to mastermind and control them all the time, and how this is creating disconnection between us?
Right. Oh, that's so important. We don't want to push our children away, and we don't want to create the disconnect. And I think that's hard for a lot of parents to hear. You would agree that sometimes they are the reason. And I admit, when I was reading through those parts of your book, The Conscious Parent, there was part of me that was sort of like, well, I don't want to know that this is true, that I really am probably causing a lot of the rebellion or the conflict or whatever by the way I'm responding, by the way I'm acting. But again, it's that open door to allow us to do differently if we are willing to go through that door, if we're willing to take that look.
Right. And if it's too harsh for you to accept that you're causing something, right, that's hard, right?
Yeah,
it's hard
you're right.
for me to accept. I tell parents, okay, I'll give you a free pass on that, but no free pass on the fact that you are definitely co-creating every experience that your child is having. The child can get some responsibility for sure. The teachers could get a little bit of it. His friends could get a little bit of it. The world could get a little bit of it. You can blame the weather a little bit. I'll give you all that, but you still have full-on 50% responsibility, and we're not even taking charge of that. So
Yes.
it's really tragic how scared we are to take charge of our responsibility. But I show parents that once they do, they actually liberate themselves, because half the things they were afraid to take responsibility for, were things that shouldn't have been on the play on the in the dynamic anyway. There's noise from society that we've internalized, noise that says our children should be a particular way, that they should be stars at this or that. This is all unnecessary noise that's getting in the way of our ability to connect with our children.
Yes, and I think that's a really important point for all of you listeners to hear Dr. Shefali saying. We listen a lot to what the quote unquote experts out there say, and the quote our neighbors say, our friends say, our parents say about how we should parent, about how our kids should be raised, about how our kids should be. And you don't have to listen to all that. It is a lot of noise. I love that you're defining that as noise, because it is. It's kind of like any noise. You can't hear the thing that you really want to hear that's maybe a little quieter under the noise, which might be what your child really needs. You can't hear that if you're tuning into the noise.
Right. When we're not aware that our children are so powerful. I'm saying this because I'm reminding myself right now that we forget how powerful and resourceful they are. They know when they've messed up on a test, and they'll come and tell you, if you allow them and you've not already grounded them, they'll say, okay, Mom, that was yesterday. The moment is over. I'm not doing the test right now. I did the test yesterday. It's over. Why are you yelling at me right now?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And listeners will say, well, what about personal accountability? Our children need to put in effort. And, but let's get off all these high-handed ways of treating our children. And let's take a step back. Let's take a deep breath and begin to attune to our children differently. Allow the space for them to come forth. And that in itself will create a greater ownership within them to have effort. No child wants to get a C grade all the time. No child wants to mess up all the time. No child wants to forget their backpack at school all the time. There's something that's interfering with their ability to raise themselves into their highest level of mindfulness. So what is that? Can we as parents tune and tap into that and say, well, why is my child forgetting every day? Why is my child so apathetic or so angry? Can I possibly have co-created this? Can I possibly alleviate this through my energy? Yes. Daring to ask these questions will help our children feel seen, heard, and connected to.
Yes, that's a great question. So everybody out there, can I have possibly co-created this? I mean, that's just right there, just the idea of possibly, and probably yes, always there's an answer. Yes, you possibly could have. The other thing that I'm hearing and that I want to kind of transition to, again, is this idea of when we aren't hearing our children, when we aren't letting them speak, we don't mean to make them feel like they're not capable or worthy or whatever. Of course, we love our children. We're trying to do the best we can as parents, but that's where we all got our own insecurities, was from our parents doing the same thing to us, telling us what we should think and feel. And you're right. When we forget our backpack as a child, we already feel embarrassed by that. And so when then you add onto that, a consequence or a harsh voice, we just make the child feel less secure. And so it goes back to that idea of our own worth. And when we feel confident in our worth, we can then pass that on to our child, and we don't have to see the fact that they got the bad grade as reflecting upon us as a parent, because we are comfortable in who we are, and we realize our, interdependence versus our, being in control of them, and we can then nurture their self-worth as well. Now, I also want to touch on, and this kind of is a good place to transition into this, I want to read another section of your book from page 121, because I think all the parents out there listening can relate to this. To me, I was like, oh yeah, I can relate to all this, because I'm sure some of you out there listening and thinking, well, this might work well for, everyday problems like forgetting your backpack or maybe not being able to get good grades or something like that. But what about when our child's really misbehaving, or not, I don't even want to say misbehaving, but really getting into trouble, like serious trouble, or, it's trouble that we just don't know how to handle. I love that you are very clear in understanding that, we all are going to have our times as parents where we're going to be pushed to the edge, no matter what. And that's what I'm going to read from page 121. So whether we like it or not, every one of us is destined to be triggered by our children in some profound elemental way. We are going to, at some point or another, just lose it. We are going to shout or even scream. We are going to call them a name we never thought we would. It's important to accept that if we are triggered by our child, this is normal. So first of all, let's make that point that it is normal. So Dr. Shefali is not sitting here saying we're going to always be conscious and act in a conscious way. Maybe eventually that's our goal, but certainly it's not where we're going to start, and it's not the norm to suddenly just change your whole way of being and never get frustrated with your child. But she goes on to say, in one way or another, each of us will have to confront our shadow parent with its overwhelming desire for control. And I think that what you're saying here is when those times come when we get pushed to the limits, again, it's that opportunity to confront the, quote, shadow parent. I love the idea of shadow work. So explain what you mean by the shadow parent for those listening.
Well, I think sometimes life sends us the precise lessons we need that we've been ignoring in the shadows of our consciousness, right? So we kind of know there's an issue, but we deny it. It's kind of like we kind of know our bodies are not functioning, but then we don't go to the doctor, we don't take care of ourselves, and then something blows up. Yeah. Or we're not paying attention to our kids and we kind of know they're off track, but we don't know what to do, or we're just too distracted or too overwhelmed or too stressed out in our own lives, and then boom, right? So that's a great question, because the shadow parent is the parent that has been denying the present moment in some way, and stuff has been shoved into the shadow because they've been too overwhelmed or just not known how to deal with it. But what happens with life is that it sometimes presents us with the very thing that confronts the stuff that's in the shadow and forces us to bring stuff out of the shadow into the light of awareness. We hate when life does that to us, because there's a reason we shove stuff into the shadow.
Yes.
Because we were emotionally unable to contain it. We were unable to sustain it. We did not believe we could handle it. So we shoved it into the shadow. Life is going to, for the most part, trigger not what's in the light, because what's in the light is already in awareness. It's going to trigger what's in the shadow. That's why it's called a trigger, because it's triggering something. It's forcing us to confront a truth that we are not ready to confront. I am personally grateful for life when it does that, but most people hate it and they resist it when life does that. The more we resist it, the more it blows up. The more stuff that's in the shadow, the more life will trigger us, right? So it's in direct proportion. Our ability to get triggered is in direct proportion to the stuff that's in the shadow. So I always tell parents, oh, you got triggered? Great, let's look at it. Yes. Don't shove it back in the shadow. So say you slapped your kid and you did something unthinkable. Most parents want to shove that experience back into the shadow by having guilt and shame. The guilt and shame shoves things back into the shadow. It doesn't bring it into the light of awareness. So what I tell parents is, yummy, let's look at that. Like, good, you hit your kid. Good, it's out there in the open. Let's not run away and hide and pretend it shouldn't have happened through guilt and shame. Let's work on it. So that's the only way to move forward with courage. And then when our children blow up with an issue, right, say they are not just forgetting a backpack, say they're now in serious emotional trouble, now we want to run into the shadows again. But I say to parents, this is your wake-up call to see how you co-created this reality, and now let's do your part of the work. Your kid may not be able to do their part. Maybe it's a bit too late for them. Let's see how you can course correct. I call it a big course correction. Let's really change highways. What can we do differently? Let's shake things up. Maybe we leave town. Maybe we all go to a wilderness program. Maybe we all go for therapy together. What can we do as a family to understand that now this is a big wake-up call for everybody? Let's course correct. Let's not be afraid of the wake-up call. Let's understand that this is happening for all of us to wake up and have the courage to change highways. It takes a lot of work, but your child is screaming for help. Yes. Let's give them the help. Let's not deny that we were part of the dynamic.
Beautiful. Course correct. So that's our opportunity. That's what we talk about each week here on Motherhood. We're talking about choosing to grow through motherhood instead of just go through it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about like you say, taking those moments that we think are awful and taking a deeper look at it and being willing to then let that lead us into a new course, a new direction, a new way of being with our child. And that applies as well with our children. And I want to kind of wrap up with this idea, then we'll do our simple solution segment. The idea that, as you say, bad behavior in children is really the search for inner goodness, their search for inner goodness. So tell us a little bit about that as it relates to what we've been talking about, because this applies to us. I mean, really, when we behave badly, we have that potential to find our inner goodness and to change and to course correct, and our children have the same potential.
So let's take the example in our own lives when we're unhappy at work, right? Mm-hmm. And we keep complaining to our friend, I'm unhappy and I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate my life, I hate my job, my boss, my life. Your friend is most likely going to tell you, listen, leave, let's find a new way. You're not happy, this is not serving your needs, let's do something differently. Okay, now imagine that your child is showing you that they're unhappy with their life. Now they're going to show it in the same way that you show it, but as an adult, but you're just appropriate at work. The minute you leave work, you can go to a bar, you can have a cigarette, you can gossip to your friends. We have a lot of outlets that our children don't have. Mm-hmm. The only outlets our children have is to get angry with us, or to roll their eyes, or to disconnect from their academics. So what do we do now? Imagine we were that friend. Technically, as the friend, we should say to them, you're really deeply unhappy. I see that. Let me help you. Let's find a new way to do this. Let's change environments. Let's really find a way to get you back on track. But we forget that we're friends of our children's spirit. We are their parents. So what do we do as parents? We blame our children. We yell at them. We castigate them. We shame them. We dominate them. We punish them. We control them. We ground them. Look how differently we would treat ourselves and how differently we treat our children. When our children behave badly, we don't see this as a call to searching for what is the need that's not being met. We don't look at this as a cry of their spirit. We look at this as a reason for us to further hunker down on control. Isn't that just so tragic, the different ways we treat our children?
It is. And I'm having sort of an aha moment here as you're saying this, because it's really clicking for me what you're saying, that if I were behaving badly, I usually feel so bad about myself if I yell at my kids, if I get frustrated, which I do. I get overwhelmed, I get tired and hormonal and whatever else. And then I go in my room and I have my moment where I'm crying or I'm trying to figure it out. And I immediately start soul searching and trying to pull together what's going on here. And the answer for me is self-compassion. I need to nurture myself. I need to give myself more sleep or more rest or some time to work on what I'm trying to figure out in my life so that I can course correct and make that change. And yet we don't do that with our children. So we are modeling for them. If we do it with ourselves, we can model that, but we should be doing it with them as well, having compassion for our children in their bad behavior versus the opposite, which is what we all do. We get frustrated, we start yelling, we punish, we discipline, whatever you want to call it. And really, we're just harping on more consequences to them already feeling poorly. And imagine, I'm just thinking for you listeners, imagine if somebody did that with you, and they probably did when you were young, and you know how that feels. And that's why we keep doing it. But we can, as you say, course correct and choose a different way. We can choose a more conscious way.
Right. We need to always be aware that our children's spirits are calling for help. We need to attune at the spiritual level, not at the behavioral level. And that's the biggest disconnect today, is that we're always looking at the behavior. And because it's much easier, it's observable, there's not much work to do. It's just, and then we have the delusion, change the behavior, change the self. No, many times it's change the self, change the behavior. So let's treat our children as we would want to be treated. That's quite a simple value. And truly connect with their spiritual selves, their essence, and not the noise of the ego.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to wrap it up, and a beautiful take-home point for all of us. There's so much we can take home from today. We've had such an amazing discussion. I'm going to have you back to talk more, because there's so much more I would want to talk about. But to truly look for our children, into our children's spirit and to connect with them spiritually, I echo that. That is what we're talking about today, and what we can all strive for as parents. Instead of just doing things the way we've always done it, we can choose a different way. And that's the point of today. No shaming, no feeling bad about yourself as a parent, but just really seeing a new way and choosing to go there, hopefully. Right?
Yes.
So let's, as before we finish, I want to do my Dr. Christie's Simple Solutions. And this is my segment where I get to share products, ideas, programs that I think will help you make your life easier, moms out there, make it simpler, make it more meaningful, make it richer. And today I'm thrilled to get to share that Dr. Shefali is going to be doing a workshop, a 3-day intensive workshop on deconstructing parenthood and parenting the conscious way. So all the things we've talked about today, she and many incredible guests as well are going to join her. I'm going to have her tell us about that in a minute, but I also want to just plug also her incredible books. I couldn't recommend them more highly. The Conscious Parent and Out of Control. So if you're wanting more on what we're talking about conscious parenting today, and if you're wanting more information on how to do discipline a different way and to do it the conscious way, I urge you to go and find her books. They're all over the place. You can find them through her website. You can also find more information about everything we've talked about today at Dr. Shefali. It's SHEFALI.com. Now, tell us a little bit about your upcoming workshop.
I'm so excited because on December 4th through the 6th, starting Friday evening, all day Saturday and a short day on Sunday, we're going to have a intensive on conscious parenting where I get the opportunity to really go deeper in the principles we've been talking about. But I'm also being joined by Neil Donald Walsh. He wrote Conversations with God, and he's come out with his incredible new book called Conversations with God for Parents. Susan Stiffelman, who's written Parenting with Presence, Parenting Without Power Struggles, Malika Chopra, who talks about living with intention and living with intent, and so many amazing speakers. Bryant McGill, who is a great figure on social media. He talks about simple reminders and a really powerful way to look at life. So I'm joined by these wonderful speakers who are going to spearhead this message of conscious parenting into the world. And also an incredible speaker, Susie Lula, who's going to be talking about self-compassion, self-care, especially for us mothers.
Yes.
So we're going to try and touch on all topics related to conscious living, to touch upon our wholeness, our inner abundance, and how we can radiate with this sense of worth. And through this shining that we will, radiate with, our children will absorb the way to be in the world. So I invite parents to find out more about the workshop. We only have around 25 or 30 seats left. It's going to be in Long Beach, California, December 4th through 6th. We have people flying in from all over the country and outside. And it's going to be an incredible gathering of conscious parents who are trying to do this differently and change the paradigm. And really, we're creating this movement to revolutionize how we parent our children.
Oh, it just sounds like an incredible event, one you will not want to miss. So everybody out there, mark your calendars, December 4th through 6th or 3rd through 6th?
4th through 6th. And
And
all the information is on my website to register, but we only have a few seats left.
Only a few seats left. So act quickly because you don't want to miss out on this. And this is going to be in Long Beach, California, coming up soon. Yes. And you can find all the information on drshefali.com on her website. And also, again, check out her books. And if you can't make it to that workshop, just keep in touch with her. Follow her on social media. Go to her website and look for upcoming other events. I'm sure you'll do other things like this in the future. So if you can't make it there, or if it's too far, or if it's not in your area, just keep watching because Dr. Shefali is all over the place and she has so much wisdom that you want to be part of. Trust me. So
thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, it's been such a joy having you here and getting to know you better and learning from you today and growing with you today. So
thank you.
We are grateful for having you. And for everybody out there, thank you for tuning in each week. I hope you'll join us back here next week on Motherhood. In the meantime, go visit my website at drchristinahibbert.com. I will have a blog post about today's episode with some of the details we talked about with Dr. Shefali, as well as links to her website and her upcoming event. So check that out on my website and blog. And until next time, I hope you will continue to choose to grow through motherhood instead of just going through it, because it's a lot better to grow through it, and it's a lot more fun to do it together as we do each week here on Motherhood Radio. Bye-bye, everybody.